You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Simon Parker. Today we're discussing fair play in football and asking if the normal boundaries of right and wrong apply as much in the world of football as they do in the rest of life. On Sunday, Liverpool hosted Chelsea at Anfield. On the face of it, and for much of the game, it was just a normal Premier League fixture between two of the biggest football clubs in England. One second-half incident, however, has made all the headlines. It wasn't a wonder strike from 30 yards that caught the headlines, nor a spectacular save from one of the team's goalkeepers. In fact, it was Liverpool striker Luis Suarez biting Chelsea defender Branislav Ivanovic. The latest incident in a career tinged with controversy, and the most recent example of football and its image becoming a talking point for the wrong reasons. Once again, the viewing public saw a highly paid professional sportsman acting in a way that simply wouldn't be acceptable in any other walk of life. In recent times, football's image in Britain has been tarnished with high-profile cases of racial abuse, a rape conviction, Sunday's now infamous bite, and in the amateur game there have been countless examples of matches boiling over into violence. Are footballers getting too big for their boots, and are they beyond the realms of normal behaviour? With me in the studio to discuss this issue is sports psychologist Dan Abrahams, Football Weekly podcaster and writer at guardian.co.uk, Barry Glendenning, sports journalist and author Mahir Bose, and on the phone we have former Liverpool, Oxford and Ireland midfielder Ray Houghton. First, let's begin by talking about Sunday's incident and the latest controversy surrounding Luis Suarez. Sports psychologist Dan Abrahams, it's strange behaviour from a grown man, wasn't it?
No, I think that what a lot of people don't quite appreciate at times is, football works in seconds. The brain works in milliseconds. The brain is working very, very quickly. It's constantly throwing out thoughts and feelings and judgments as the game progresses. To my mind, the game is shot through with emotion. It's enormously challenging to ask a player to react and respond in an appropriate way all the time. The reality is that this footballer just has a set of maladaptive behaviours when he gets frustrated. To my mind, it's a coaching challenge. It's a coaching problem. Football coaches need to be able to help players manage their mindset in the moment. That is something that Brendan Rodgers and his staff can do on the training ground. I don't think we can demonise all footballers, or we can demonise Luis Suarez for what was an inappropriate response, and I know he's done it before, but I don't think there's mental health issues here, or I don't think there's serious problems. I just think it's a football incident that he needs to improve his responses and reactions to frustrating moments.
From a psychological perspective, is there anything significant about his choice to bite an opposition member of the team? Is there anything significant about that? I mean, he could have punched them, he could have kicked them. Why did he choose to bite them?
I don't think there's anything significant when it comes to biting as compared to punching. Look, when a footballer becomes frustrated, or when a sports person in general becomes frustrated, they feel that surge of adrenaline, that surge of emotion, and they have one of two choices. You direct it in one of two ways, towards competitiveness, or in the maladaptive way, which is expressing it on an opponent or on a teammate. And the reality is that Suarez has built up this habit and pattern over time to direct his emotion, his anger, his frustration, his temperament on his opponent. That is wrong. That is maladaptive, and I'm not for 1 second supporting Suarez here. But what I will say is it is purely a coaching challenge here. He just as a right back might clip a ball, pass a ball to the winger or the midfielder, that's a behaviour. All I'm saying is that Suarez has a set of behaviours that are maladaptive, and Brendan Rodgers and his coaching staff have to help Suarez change those sets of behaviours. So I'm not excusing him. I'm just saying that in football, as coaches, as auxiliary coaches, we have a a duty of care, a responsibility to help these high-profile athletes be able to compete in a fair way, in a competitive way, and behave responsibly.
Ray Houghton, over 150 appearances for Liverpool. Ray, can anyone in their right mind ever attempt to defend the action of Luis Suarez?
No, you can't defend his actions whatsoever. I'm interested to hear what Dan was saying there. I played football professionally for 20 years, played with a number of superstars who could cross the line between genius and madness, but at no stage did I ever see them bite anyone. I've seen them maybe going for challenges, whether that's the same sort of behaviour that Dan's talking about. I'm not so sure. And I'd love to know how you coach that out of someone. I really would, because if there's anyone in the future who's going to do something similar to Suarez, I would be interested to find out, what's the cure or how you go about, trying to achieve that. Is it not just in the DNA as an individual? And if so, how do you coach it out of someone?
Mahir, some of the greatest footballers of all time have always towed this fine line of being incredible footballers but also being hotheads. Cantona, Balotelli. Is this just par for the course?
Well, I think football, I disagree that it's a coaching problem. I don't think you can coach it out. I think football has a moral problem. The game used to be described as the gentleman's game played by hooligans. For instance, take a small example. A ball goes out for a throw-in. Both sets of players claim it. When one set of players knows that it's not his throw-in, right? Now, that is accepted in football. It's a minor thing. Or there's a free kick, say 10 yards away from the goal, he'll push the ball a bit further. Now, that is accepted in football. And I think what this is, Suarez, of course, has his own personal problems, and one must say this incident has had a much higher profile, partly because of Suarez, because one thinks back, and I watched that incident of Jermaine Defoe biting, and, the referee saw it, both players got yellow cards, nothing happened, the drama of it wasn't great. But I think where football has a problem to answer is, why does the game, to a certain extent, allow little what might be called gamesmanship, which then escalates into a huge moral issue here of how does a player behave? What is a player told how he can behave? What if you like, education is given, and that education has to start. I mean, these players, remember, have come to clubs at a very early age, at the age of 13 or 14. So if you like, the club is not just a footballing club, it's an educational club. What exactly have the players been brought up? And I don't think any club in the world, and certainly not English clubs, provide any sort of moral guidance, any sort of education. And of course, again, because football is a team game, the team matters more than anything else.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Simon Parker, and today we're discussing the conduct of professional footballers and asking if they're beyond the realms of normal behaviour. And today we're discussing the conduct of professional footballers and asking if they're beyond the realms of normal behaviour. I'm joined in the studio by sports psychologist Dan Abrahams, a man who has worked with many high-profile footballers. Football Weekly podcaster and journalist at Guardian.co.uk Barry Glendenning, sports journalist and author Mahir Bose, and former Liverpool, Oxford and Ireland midfielder Ray Houghton. Barry Glendenning from the Guardian. Do you agree with what Mahir said there? Do you think that football is an incredibly unique environment?
I don't think you can apply the same standards that you would expect, say, in an office environment to a football field or a rugby field where things are going to get heated, players are going to go in with hard tackles or whatever. But I also don't think that excuses what Luis Suarez did. He bit somebody. That's just peculiar behaviour. It's really strange for a grown man to bite another unprovoked, and what makes it even more peculiar is it's not the first time he's done it. If a 14-year-old child did that, they'd be put into care or made to see a psychologist. If a dog did it, he'd be put down. And yet Luis Suarez has an awful lot of people apparently attempting to defend him, which I find very strange.
Well, Suarez was quick to defend his actions on Sunday, but with his rap sheet and with his background and the things that he's done in the past, for how long is an apology merely going to be enough in this situation?
I don't buy his apology in the slightest. It was a very eloquent apology for a man who doesn't speak very good English, which would suggest he didn't come up with it himself, and I would be very surprised if the only reason he apologised is because he was forced to by his football club, and his apology would, I suspect, have been worded by Liverpool's PR department.
Ray Houghton, how much of a headache is this for Liverpool Football Club? For how long do you think they'll continue to tolerate behaviour like this?
It's a huge problem for them because they don't want to tarnish the Liverpool brand. This has been a world club for a number of years. You just have to look at his history, its achievements. 18 league titles. They won the European Cup on 5 occasions. And they're trying to brand the product around the world. They've got American owners. They'll be very unhappy that it's happened to Suarez again. We had the incident with Patrice Evra, where he was banned for a number of matches. That could have cost Kenny Dalglish, and a lot of people thought it did cost Kenny Dalglish his job. I think they did act swiftly this time around. Whether it was his apology or not, I think the bigger picture was, if you ever look at Luis Suarez when he walked off the pitch, arm in arm with Steven Gerrard, I don't think he even knew what he'd done or whether it bothered him about the fact that he had actually bitten Ivanovic. He wasn't as if he thought to himself, wow, I've made a huge mistake, the cameras would have seen it, I might be in trouble. It's as if he didn't even do it. Once again, I'd like to come back to the psychologist in your room to give us the reasons why that was. Is it a case of, in his mind, he didn't even know he had done it, and it was just a case of, let's get on with the fact that I've scored a late equaliser in the game. But as far as Liverpool's concerned, it has been damaging. They will deal with it and have dealt with it internally, and they'll wait for the outcome of the FA to see how many games he's going to be banned for.
As a professional footballer, Ray, how possible is it for footballers to feel beyond the realms of normal life? It's a very unique environment. Yeah. Is there some examples of people thinking, actually, I can get away with this, so I'm going to give it a go?
They do that day to day. If you ever see the players when they go out, they do think they're superhuman, but this ain't something new. This isn't something that's just been around in the last 4 or 5 years or since the Premier League's been around. This has been going on for a long, long time. They've always been, looked at as, they're special. They're up there with the celebrities now. They're up there with the top rock stars. We've seen politicians who want to be involved with football clubs in and around footballers. Look at David Beckham, what an icon and an ambassador he's been. He's helping out with the Olympics, helping out with a World Cup bid as well. That's how important, footballers have become. And I think that's shown when they go out now. If you watch a footballer when he goes out for a night out, he gets celebrity status. He probably doesn't have to put his hand in his pocket anymore. They go out there and everyone wants to be associated with him. That's where the changes come around. And how the players deal with that is usually important.
Sports psychologist Dan Abrahams, you've been working in football clubs for many years. You've been working with lots of high-profile footballers. Let's talk about that unique environment and what Ray says. Is there the potential that footballers feel like they're beyond the realms of normality?
I used to play professional golf, and during the course of my career, very unsuccessful career I might add, I played golf with some of the most obnoxious people I've ever met. My experience over the past decade, immersing myself in the world of football, is actually some of the footballers are some of the nicest, most pleasant sports people I've actually met. Of course, that some of them at the top level of the game, and we're talking about 0.001%. Hang on, I deal every single day of my life with players who don't make it, who play lower leagues, who struggle to pay their mortgage. So we're talking about, let's not demonise the whole of football here. We're talking about 0.001%. We're talking about a tiny amount of players who are good enough to reach superstar status. And of course, some of them are going to let that get to their head. I want footballers, especially my clients, to be confident, but confident in the right way.
Something which I think Dan's brought up, which is quite interesting, is the fact that he's saying people may be demonising this almost subculture of footballers. We've got 2 journalists in the studio. Barry, do you think there is an element of demonising going on?
Oh, there certainly is. Most footballers I've met are very nice guys, humble guys, funny, intelligent, nice guys. Well, maybe not so intelligent, but, nice guys. But the ones we hear about the most, the ones who make the headlines, are the guys who misbehave. And the rest of their profession tend to get tarred with the same brush. But every sport has cheats. Cheating is nothing new. The very first Tour de France, I think, half the field was disqualified for it because they were taking trains and cars. But yeah, it is unfair to demonise all footballers for the actions of a very poorly behaved few.
Here, this is the case must be that, football needs people like Luis Suarez, don't they? We need to fill the back page with something other than just goals, isn't it? We need interesting stories like this.
No, but I think we are getting a new cast of footballers, which we have developed in the last 15 years. You see, if you look back on the great footballers of this country, the Stanley Matthews, probably one of the greatest names in English football, he had a relationship with the fans, right? Even in those days, even at £10 a week, which was the maximum wage, he was paid more than the average industrial wage. But it wasn't that big distance. What has happened is footballers have become superstars. So the fans, if you like, that there's a big dysfunction. Nobody can actually identify with the modern footballer. And I'm talking at the top level. I'm not talking of the footballers that, normally trade in. One can identify with them. They have pressures of jobs. They lose their jobs. But these people are superstars. And in the absence of, if you like, role models in the rest of society, we don't trust our politicians. We don't have great religious leaders, or we could hardly name. I think most people would struggle to name the Archbishop of Canterbury. And people like that. Because those people have declined, if you like, we have made them into role models. And if you like, we have given them an extra role which they're not able to sustain. Because it's wrong to see Luis Suarez or any of these footballers as role models who have anything to teach us about life. And given that responsibility, we have not actually educated them. I take down point, about what the clubs do emotionally and in other ways. And it's very interesting. Of course, Luis Suarez is a foreign player. It's very interesting to talk to English players whose command of the English language is poorer than most foreign players who come here and, who speak the language much better. So there's also an educational process here, which I don't think the football authorities, they're looking at it, but they haven't solved the problem yet.
Brad Glendenning from The Guardian. What's your reaction to what Mahir said? And also, can you compare the British game to the rest of Europe and to the rest of the world in any way?
Well, I think what we tend to forget is that football is all about entertainment. The game was originally begun, set up to keep sort of the riffraff entertained at the weekend, so they come into work in their industries happy and content and rested and not hungover on a Monday morning. And it's a soap opera. It's like any TV soap opera. There's a constant narrative arc, and like any TV soap opera, it needs its villains. That game between Chelsea and Liverpool was fairly unremarkable, apart from what Luis Suarez did to Branislav Ivanovic. And if that hadn't happened, lots of fans wouldn't have been outraged, and we still wouldn't be talking about it halfway through the next week. So at the end of the day, it is just football. It's not that important.
Ray Houghton, former Liverpool and Ireland player. What's your reaction to that football is just football? You've been a footballer. You've made a very successful living as being a footballer, and now someone who works in the footballing media. What's your reaction to someone saying that football is just football? There's more important things in life.
Well, there is. There's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. There is more important things in life, but there is millions and millions of people who pay large amount of money to watch football, whether it be at the turnstiles, season tickets, or through buying your Sky, which can be very costly on a monthly basis to watch your sport. It's interesting what Mahir said earlier about Sir Stanley Matthews and what a great player he was and how he had this camaraderie with fans. I agreed with that to a certain extent. I do think that players don't speak enough to the fans today, but I don't blame the players for that. I think there's so many other people at football clubs now, who the press officers, who don't allow you to get anywhere near the players today. And I think the social networks helped in that way as well, or not helped in that way, should I say. Camera phones hasn't helped. Players are now worried that there are people out there who want to get a story on them rather than be just a fan, and that's where the concern are with the players. And you can understand that when newspapers are asking for stories on players, have you been with this player? And then that's why the players are wary of anyone that comes up to them and asks for an autograph, for a picture. They're out in the back of their mind thinking, is that someone trying to get a story on me? That's where it's changed. In my day, that didn't happen. You could go out with the fans, you could have a drink with them, you could go out with the reporters, and you had a good rapport with them. It was good entertainment. Now it's changed dramatically because there's certain newspapers who want stories on footballers and what they've done wrong.
Ray, you didn't have a minder when you gave interviews, and you didn't look across at him when you were asked a question about why you didn't run down the wings properly.
Absolutely, Mahir. I tell you what, you would have had my phone number, my home number. How many reporters, journalists today have actually got the mobile numbers of footballers? It's dwindling. I've spoke to people, reporters who I used to, get on with very well, and that's one of the things they keep telling me is increasingly happening. That players today don't give out their mobile phone numbers to the journalists anymore. You don't have that rapport with them, and there's not the rapport with the fans. But who's to blame? The players are obviously wary what's going on, and I think it certainly is down to, as I mentioned earlier, the people working at football clubs who don't let you near the players anymore, and I don't think it's good for the game.
Dan Abraham, sports psychologist, we've mentioned you work with footballers day in, day out. With the rise of modern technology, with the rise of social networking and things like that, Have you noticed that footballers feel more vulnerable? Are they more cloak and dagger these days?
I think they feel more vulnerable because the territory has changed. Mahir mentioned Sir Stanley Matthews, but we're not in that day and age anymore where, there's a 24/7 magnifying glass on these players. And that means they're in demand. That means they are susceptible to, if they say one wrong thing, people can jump on them. Of course, they're more nervous. They are the protagonists at the end of a multi-billion pound industry. Of course they're nervous. Of course they're concerned about their every given word, their every given sentence. They have to be media trained. They have to be diplomatic in a highly emotionally charged game. So look, they are wary. The map has changed, and it's more of a challenge for them now with this sort of media frenzy that surrounds them.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Simon Parker, and today we're discussing the conduct of professional footballers and asking if they're beyond the realms of normal behaviour. Barry Glendenning, it was quite interesting to see Liverpool fans leaving Anfield on Sunday, and everyone interviewed, all Liverpool fans, they didn't have a problem with what Luis Suarez did. They were actually in full praise of the fact that he'd scored them a last-minute goal. Is it a case that in football, abnormal behaviour, which wouldn't be accepted anywhere else in culture, you can get away with it in football because it's purely a results-based business, and he's delivered the product this season?
Yeah, I think as long as a player is delivering on the field, any kind of bad behaviour generally will be excused. Luis Suarez is, by considerable margin, Liverpool's best player, and I think their supporters are terrified that he's going to leave. And if he does leave during the summer, which I suspect he might, that's just pure speculation on my part, I think Liverpool fans will then claim that he was hounded out by the media, when in fact, if he does leave, it will be because some other team has offered him more money and the opportunity to play Champions League football.
Dan Abrahams, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I'd say with Liverpool Football Club, and I don't know if Ray on the phone will agree with me here, but what a great opportunity for Liverpool Football Club to show the world that they have a great coaching culture, that they care about their players. It's their Eric Cantona, if you like. It's their opportunity to say, we can help this player, this superstar, this naturally gifted, some are calling him a genius, which is, I think, a far often used word. It's a word used far too often. This is our opportunity to help this player excel in this environment. No, we do not accept how he has behaved in this match, but we are going to support him, and he is going to be a Liverpool player for a long time because we are going to get him or help him and support him get to a position where he is purely scoring goals. He is making the headlines for his man of the match winning performances.
Mahir, looking at sport and football more generally, in more general terms, is there any lessons that football can learn from other sports? And is there a way that footballers can perhaps conduct themselves in a way that they can glean from other sports people?
Well, the obvious lesson to learn is that there should have been a big television screen at Liverpool showing this incident. Had this happened in rugby, all the rugby fans, both Rugby League and Union, would have seen it. In football, there isn't. Let me give you another example. In the 2006 World Cup, Zinedine Zidane head-butted and was red-carded. Nobody in the ground, apart from the people in the press box who saw it on television, knew why he was red-carded because no explanation was given. The fans were kept in complete darkness, and there was a near riot situation because Zidane was playing his last match as a great player and so on. Similarly, with this incident, and it's interesting, yes, Liverpool fans defended Suarez, but some of them actually said they didn't believe he had bitten anybody because they said, where is the proof? Now, football is very worried, and this is the football authorities' fault. Football is very worried that if they show that incident, there will be a huge explosion. Now, actually, football needs to tackle this and say, tell what happened with Suarez. The people back home, around the world, saw it. The people in the ground and the referee didn't see it at all. So you have a very odd situation where football is being played in two worlds. One where only what you see on the ground, and the whole world sees something totally different, a much bigger picture. And football needs to bring that together and be bold enough to say, if we show these pictures to the people in the ground, they won't explode in a riot and make the situation impossible. If they can't do that, then football needs to ask itself where it's going.
Ray Houghton, what can the football authorities do to change behaviour like this? Do they need to hand down more stringent sentences?
If you ban Luis Suarez for 10 more games, is that going to stop him doing it just because of the ban? I actually agree with Dan. I think you need help. He certainly needs help. You know, he's done that. He's got history of doing this before. We know in his last game for Ajax against PSV, he done a similar action and he was banned for 7 games. But obviously he didn't get the help behind the scenes, or else he wouldn't have done it again. I think he needs people in and around him to sit him down, show him the error of his ways, and help him as much as they can. I've seen it too often in football. People with depression and other illnesses that they've got, and they don't get the help required. You come into your club at a young age, and all they're looking at is your footballing ability, but they don't look into the mental side of you and where they should try and help you. And I think there is something in place, or there should be something in place at football clubs that can help players who have got problems. Not everyone's going to be the same. Not every individual is going to go out there and think in the same way. I mean, for 20 years as a player, I never bit anyone. I had no intention of doing it. But there are others who might try it and who have done it. And it's no good just banning them for it. You have to try and help them as much as you can.
Mahir, very briefly, what's your reaction to what Ray said?
Well, I'd like to ask Ray. He came at a very early age at a club. Apart from, getting good coaching skills taught into him and all that sort of thing, what sort of education did the club give him? Did the club actually tell him how to behave? Or, probably directed him to a hygienist to improve his teeth? But, that's just a joke, Ray. But,
I'll tell you what I had, Mahir. I'll tell you what I went to West Ham as a 17-year-old. I had people like Billy Bonds, Trevor Brookin, like they were role models to me. I don't think footballers should be role models to every child out there. I think they should be role models to footballers. And I think if you look up to someone and someone behaves in the right way, you can actually feed off of that and say, you're right, I can see a top professional, how he acts, how he responds in situation when you watch him in football matches. I don't not think enough footballers come through today actually look up to their peers and say, that's the way I want to act, that's the way that you should act, because that's how responsible you have to be when you play football. I don't think that happens today. It certainly did in my time.
Presumably, Ray, you had to clean boots, sweep the terraces as well, which modern-day youngsters don't have to do, and I suspect that is a huge drawback in their development. I think
one of the biggest problems is young players today, talented young players, get too much too early, and I think it goes to their head, and that's why some of them swagger around as if they own the football club when they've not even played a game in the first team. The bank balance is unbelievably large for a kid of 17, 18 who have done absolutely nothing in the game, and that's where clubs have to tackle it. They have to look at potential and say, we're only going to give you so much a month, the rest we'll put away and invest for you, but we don't want you going around thinking that you've actually done something before your time.
Sports psychologist Dan Abrahams, one final point. How can football clubs tackle that psychological aspect of players being a little bit too big for their boots at an earlier stage?
I came out of a contract at the beginning of this season. I was in a contract with the Premier League Academy, working with the Academy and Development Squad. I was creating a football toughness programme between the ages of 12 and 21. It was also reaching out to upskilling coaches to be able to help youngsters manage emotionally, manage their mental side of the game. That's what football clubs need to introduce. They need to have that support there. We need a coaching climate, a coaching culture that helps young players stay humble, help them grow. At this club, we actually had our young scholars, they did do jobs. They cleaned the boots of the first team. Did it make a huge difference? Look, I think it made some difference. I think it did help them stay grounded a little bit more. If we want to help create more professional footballers, we do need to help our young players stay grounded, to learn, to improve, to stay humble, to stay focused, to be passionate about being the best footballer they can be, rather than being a multi-millionaire with a Lamborghini. That ultimately gets to the crux of the challenge. That's what they're doing at Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, some of the best academies in Europe. That's what we need in Britain.
Unfortunately, we're out of time for today's discussion. Thank you to all of my guests, sports journalist Mahir Bose, sports psychologist Dan Abrahams, Barry Glendenning from The Guardian, and the former Liverpool, Oxford and Ireland midfielder Ray Houghton.
To my mind, it's a coaching challenge. It's a coaching problem. Football coaches need to be able to help players manage their mindset in the moment. That is something that Brendan Rodgers and his staff can do on the training ground. I don't think we can demonise all footballers, or we can demonise Luis Suarez for what was an inappropriate response, and I know he's done it before, but I don't think there's mental health issues here, or I don't think there's serious problems. I just think it's a football incident that he needs to improve his... A lot of people don't quite appreciate at times is football works in in seconds. The brain works in milliseconds. The brain is working very, very quickly. It's constantly throwing out thoughts and feelings and judgments as the game progresses. To my mind, the game is shot through with emotion. It's enormously challenging to ask a player to react and respond in an appropriate way all the time. The reality is that this footballer just has a set of maladaptive behaviours when he gets frustrated.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Simon Parker. Today we're discussing fair play in football and asking if the normal boundaries of right and wrong apply as much in the world of football as they do in the rest of life. On Sunday, Liverpool hosted Chelsea at Anfield. On the face of it, and for much of the game, it was just a normal Premier League fixture between two of the biggest football clubs in England. One second-half incident, however, has made all the headlines. It wasn't a wonder strike from 30 yards that caught the headlines, nor a spectacular save from one of the team's goalkeepers. In fact, it was Liverpool striker Luis Suarez biting Chelsea defender Branislav Ivanovic. The latest incident in a career tinged with controversy, and the most recent example of football and its image becoming a talking point for the wrong reasons. Once again, the viewing public saw a highly paid professional sportsman acting in a way that simply wouldn't be acceptable in any other walk of life. In recent times, football's image in Britain has been tarnished with high-profile cases of racial abuse, a rape conviction, Sunday's now infamous bite, and in the amateur game there have been countless examples of matches boiling over into violence. Are footballers getting too big for their boots, and are they beyond the realms of normal behaviour? With me in the studio to discuss this issue is sports psychologist Dan Abrahams, Football Weekly podcaster and writer at guardian.co.uk, Barry Glendenning, sports journalist and author Mahir Bose, and on the phone we have former Liverpool, Oxford and Ireland midfielder Ray Houghton. First, let's begin by talking about Sunday's incident and the latest controversy surrounding Luis Suarez. Sports psychologist Dan Abrahams, it's strange behaviour from a grown man, wasn't it?
No, I think that what a